not encouraging or advising anyone to modify their firearms. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Hey, what's up everyone? This video will be about fitting mainspring housings to 1911s. What I present here will apply to double stack and single stack 1911 pistols. I've swapped out mainspring housings on a lot of different 1911s, the majority of which needed some sort of fitting. I'll talk about all the ways I've had to make adjustments to mainspring housings to fit the grip or the frame. As I go through that, I will also be fitting this heavy steel mainspring housing from Dawson Precision to this MJD grip module. This is a great way to add a little bit of weight, about 2 ounces, to a polymer 2011 grip down low, where it makes a big difference in the balance and recoil characteristics of the pistol. I'll link to the Dawson page about these in the description. I probably would have gotten asked about it. This is the STI 2011 Generation 1 style. I'm not affiliated with Dawson Precision in any way. If you're looking to replace a mainspring housing on your 1911 style pistol, hopefully this video will give you a good start. Let's get into it. You'll only need basic tools for this: calipers, larger or medium-sized flat file with at least one dead side, needle file set, and probably some 400 and 600 grit sandpaper. I mean, you can also, machine material off if you have access to that type of equipment. Before I do any fitting to the grip module or frame, I check that all my pins and internals fit properly. The lower retaining pin should slide freely through this hole. The clearance spec is 4 to 8 thousandths on the diameter. Make sure there are no burrs in here where the spring bore pokes through. You can use a round needle file or some rolled up sandpaper and smooth it out as needed. I checked that I have a nice slip fit with the upper keeper pin. I have come across an undersized keeper pin hole. It was just barely undersized. I used a small rolled up scrap of sandpaper and just worked it like this, and that was all it needed. Hopefully it's not so undersized that you have to use a drill bit, but if you did, it would be a number 44 wire gauge bit that would put you right at the top of the spec for this hole. The spring outside diameter and the outside diameter of the lower lock plunger, I believe it's called, are smaller diameter than the upper plunger. So I only use the upper plunger to check this hole. It should slide freely in there. There is 1 thou diametrical clearance minimum per ordnance spec. You can see that there are some burrs and nastiness where they drilled the cross pin hole after they drilled the spring bore. So I'm going to get in there with a round needle file and take those burrs off and recheck. What I'm looking for here is that I can drop it in and turn it upside down and it slides back out. I could have knocked some of the burrs into this hole, so I'll go through with my 400 or 600 grit sandpaper and just make sure I clean up in there one more time. If this bore is too tight, which I've had happen before, hopefully it won't take much to open it up, and you can just spin some 400 grit sandpaper in there until you get that nice slip fit, and then generally I'll take 600 or 1000 grit and spin it in there a few times to smooth everything up. If you're fitting a raw aluminum mainspring housing and you plan on having it anodized, which I would argue you should, keep in mind that this bore will close up about 2 thousandths in diameter, or about 1 thou per side, with standard mil-spec Type 3 hard anodizing as that oxide layer grows. Before we proceed, please keep in mind that fitting a mainspring housing to a grip module or a frame is on a case-by-case basis. Each pair should be measured up and the mainspring housing should be adjusted accordingly. Fit the part to the grip or the frame, not the other way around. The first order of business is just to get this guy to slide up into the grip or the frame. That's where we need to look at the width of the body right here, and the width of the rails and the thickness of the rails. If you're replacing an existing mainspring housing, then you can just measure up the old one, compare it to this new one, and adjust the oversized features on this one accordingly. If you don't have an existing mainspring housing, you can directly measure the frame or grip. It's easy to measure the width here. It's easy to measure the width inside the rail grooves like that. You can measure the rail groove thickness just like that. You can also check the width of the body like this. Like, okay, that fits in there. I know I have a problem with the rails, not the width of the body of the mainspring housing. I have seen the mainspring housing body right here be too wide. Material needs taken off of these faces right here, and you want to take an even amount off of both sides to keep the mainspring housing centered. You probably want to do this with a larger flat file. You would keep the dead edge up against your rail, and you would want to take material off a given face as evenly as possible. Make sure your file isn't doing this or this. More commonly, these rails need adjusted. They may be too wide this way, and if that's the case, you would just take material off like this with your file, the same amount per side. These rails may be too thick in this dimension, and that's the case that I have here. You can take material off the front face or back face of the rail. It's usually only a couple thousandths, so it doesn't really matter which one you pick. Don't bother trying to split the material removal between the front face and the back face of this rail. Here's how I look at it. Is the back of the mainspring housing going to be sitting proud of this edge of the grip module? In this case, it will be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take material off the front face of this rail, and that will bring it in a tiny bit. Now, if, this face were sub-flush of this area of the grip module or frame, you could take material off the back of this rail, and that would bring it out just a little bit. I'm going to be using my flat file with the dead edge down up against the body of the mainspring housing, and I want to take material off evenly like this. I don't want to file a taper along the rail by doing this or this with my file. Measure the rail width, make sure I know what my starting point is. I can put it like this in my vise and take material off just like that. I'm removing some material, I'm taking it out. I'm seeing if it slips into my grip the way I want. I'm going to be measuring the front and the back of my rail to make sure that material's coming off evenly. Once I have the fit that I want, which is this, just a nice light slip fit in and out of the grip module, I will go through with a little piece of sandpaper wrapped around a file or some stones, and just make sure I deburr and break sharp edges left by my material removal. Again, if this mainspring housing and your grip or your frame were raw aluminum, consider how finishing like anodizing might affect clearances. Vertical location of the mainspring housing in the grip or the frame is largely going to be dictated by the hole locations and sizes in the grip or frame and mainspring housing. In my experience, if there were a mismatch between this surface and this surface, height-wise, it was so slight that I've never needed to make any adjustments or bothered making any adjustments. If the mainspring housing were sticking out proud of the bottom, it may interfere with the magwell, so you could take material off the bottom here with a file. I've never seen this next issue, but presumably it could affect the vertical location of the mainspring housing in a double stack pistol. You could have this ledge right here coming up against this surface before the pinhole is lined up. If that were the case, you would just take material off this surface with your file. Once the pinholes can align vertically, there may be some fore-aft misalignment preventing the pin from going through. I ran into this before. If this happens, not a big deal. Take material off the inside of the mainspring housing pinhole with a round needle file and remove material that way or that way within the pinhole until you can get this pin through. Do not open up the frame or grip module holes. Once you can slide your mainspring housing up into the grip or the frame and get your pin through, you need to check for interference with the beaver tail or grip safety on the top side. You would want to install your beaver tail or grip safety in the frame with the thumb safeties. If you can't get your pin through now with this in the way, that means that the top of the mainspring housing is interfering with the bottom of the beaver tail or grip safety. If there is interference, I would take material off the bottom of the grip safety or beaver tail. Right here, if it's interfering with this part of the mainspring housing, or right here, if it's interfering with this part of the mainspring housing. You could determine which part is interfering by putting some grease on these surfaces, and then when they come in contact, it'll leave grease on your beaver tail, and you can figure out which of these two surfaces needs material removed. Generally, blending or modification is going to need to happen around this part of the frame or grip module. This is usually a bigger issue on the double stack pistols because there's different profiles back here for different manufacturers. This height difference right here doesn't really bother me. I suppose you could take some material off here, but then you're going to be kind of ruining the texture. This might be problematic if you want to run a magwell, and in that case what I would do is just however far the magwell comes up, take that material off with a file just in that area until the magwell goes on. If you had a situation like this where the square mainspring housing wasn't cut to match this, that looks pretty goofy. It might get in the way of a magwell as well. You could take that off. Opposite case here, you could blend the frame or grip module. That's up to you. Generally, I will blend these polymer grip modules as they don't need refinishing. If you put a magwell on, it would cover this up, so who cares? Of course, there are bobbed mainspring housings, and the single stack frame would be cut to match that profile. Just for reference, Dawson offers these heavy mainspring housings with a thinner profile. So it would sit sub-flush of the back of the grip module like this, and then you would blend the grip module into it, which would effectively reduce the grip circumference. This may make a difference for folks with smaller hands because these double stack grip modules are pretty girthy. One more thing to look out for on these double stack pistols is this part right here. You want it to match the rest of the mag funnel so you don't have any hang-ups on reloads. This one matches the profile really pretty good, so I'm going to leave it. But I've had these sticking way proud before. I took a fine Sharpie and I marked the profile of the magwell on each side and then removed material until it matched with, you can do this with a file, sandpaper, Dremel, whatever. All right, that's all I got for this one. This is not a super difficult process. Like, this doesn't have to be very precise. You're not, hand fitting a slide to a frame here or anything like that. Remove material until things fit like you want. Let me know if you have any questions or if I forgot anything. Those of you who've messed with this, what are your tips and tricks? Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.